Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, brought to you by InView, LawView's community for in-house legal professionals. InView's mission is to accelerate the evolution of the in-house legal profession, and with this podcast, we showcase modern legal leaders from across the globe. We explore their unique journeys and how they're driving the transformation of our new profession. Join David Lancelot, LawView's Chief Legal Officer and Executive Vice President of Advocacy, as he explores the cutting edge of in-house legal leadership. This is the Legal Leaders Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. I'm David Lancelot, your host. I'm the CLO and EVP Advocacy at LawView. I have the great pleasure to have with me here today Lisa Mather, who is the former General Counsel of Mars Wrigley, has a long and storied career in a number of other big names, including PayPal. I have quite a backstory at eBay as well, so it's great to have you here on the show, Lisa. We met initially at the DHL Legal Innovation Summit, thanks to Mark Smolik. I say that a lot, thanks to Mark Smolik. We had the opportunity to be on stage together. I don't know if that was the first time we met at the summit, but it was pretty epic to be up there with you and Mark. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thanks, David. It's a real pleasure to be here as well, and such a pleasure to meet this year too.
Yeah. No, it was super cool. That was a really great event, and some of the stuff you said up there, I was just like, wow, I got to get Lisa on the show. Lickety split. So here we are, which is great. And where are you coming from here today?
Yeah, so I'm joining you from sunny Sydney, and we're juggling the time zones and doing quite well.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I mean, it's great that you're able to, the wonders of modern technology, right?
Yeah.
Great that you're able to join us from Sydney. So I think probably we'll kick off with a bit of your backstory, your journey.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, you've got a really storied career to date. And I think everybody would be interested to hear, like, what was it that sort of got you into the legal profession in the first place?
Well, it was really quite accidental in my journey. I did not, in all honesty and transparency, I did not have a sort of a burning desire to be a lawyer. I don't come from a family of lawyers. I didn't have that in my background or sort of my life story growing up. And I came to law because when you study law in Australia, which I did, you do 2 degrees at once. So rather than doing sort of undergrad and then a postgrad, you do 2 degrees in parallel. And I was actually quite sort of sciencey and mathsy in my sort of academic journey up until I went to college. And I thought I would do something more along those lines as a course of study. But I had a gap year between school and university, which was also a bit unusual, but great for me because it did enable me to explore the world a little bit and also to do a little bit of navel gazing, which is a bit of a luxury, really. Like, you don't get to do very much of that necessarily at that stage of your life. And as I did my navel gazing in Denmark, in Europe, I thought, I do like humanities as well, and maybe I don't want to pursue a course of study where I don't really have any humanities nourishing that piece of who I am. So I thought, I wonder what I can find to study at university that covers both left brain and right brain types of activities. Only thing I could find was science and law. So I did a Bachelor of Science, majoring in biochemistry and organic chemistry and law. And that was just such a fantastic course of study. I loved every year, and there were a lot of years, but I loved every year of it. But I did develop a love of the law. Like, for me, I think there was something around that sort of being quite sort of structured and process oriented that I got from the science in terms of how you think about concepts. And then, the law obviously offers such sort of, rich intellectual sort of endeavors in terms of the concept that it covers. So
Sure.
I stuck with the law. Yeah.
But you were doing biochem and law at the same time? Is that?
Well,
Ouch, man. Ouch.
it was a lot of hours. It was a lot of hours on campus. I will say that.
Yeah. It's almost like you need two different kinds of brains.
Yeah.
That, like, yeah, I know some
Yeah.
people, like patent lawyers and things like that, where
Right.
they're able to do the science part and the law part
Yeah.
both really, really well. I'm always astonished that people are able to do that. I think I lack that part of the brain. I like reading about science. I certainly don't like doing the science.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fascinating. So and this is mostly in Australia you were studying? Is that
Yep.
right? Or
Yes.
okay. Right on.
Yeah.
You're studying in Australia, doing two really hard things at the same time. And then I guess, like a lot of us, going to a law firm after that. But did you work in Australia at all straight
I
out
did.
of school, or you did?
I did 2 years in Australia and sort of just got that foundation here and went to what's now Herbert Smith Freehills.
Righto.
And got a great sort of grounding and rounding out. I did a rotation in the corporate department and started to do M&A work, which I really loved. Again, like I liked sort of the strategic component to that work. I loved the pace of it. I love the fact that, you'd be doing sort of something different on a regular basis. So it gave me a lot of stimulation and a lot of education. But as soon as I'd done those 2 years, I did have itchy feet. I definitely am a little bit nomadic by nature. And I took the opportunity to go and work as an M&A lawyer or corporate finance lawyer in Clifford Chance in Hong Kong. And that was a really also pivotal time, I think, in my journey through the law in my career. A lot of Aussies, I would say, would sort of tend to go to like a London or a New York, and they are amazing opportunities too. I'd spent a lot of time during my years in college traveling in Asia during my summer breaks and so forth. And I do love that part of the world. And so I was looking for something where I could spend some more time in Asia, but still do really good quality legal work, because I was still very much in learning mode, I would say, at that early stage in my career, and hopefully will be in learning mode for my entire career. But Hong Kong offered both of those, I think. So I got tremendous work there. I got locally qualified there. I sort of did the work and did the exam and got admitted to the bar there.
Wow.
And in hindsight, and this was just really sort of luck, I found that there was such a demand for sort of, high quality, top tier legal service, but there wasn't really the cohort of attorneys based there to service that work. And so I found myself getting increasing levels of responsibility that I don't think I probably would have had that early in my career if I'd stayed in, in London or Sydney even, or something like that. So it was a very rich and rewarding time too.
Right on. So Herbie's in Oz, and then Clifford Chance in Hong Kong, and then on to a couple more firms.
Yeah, I also worked for Paul Weiss in Hong Kong too.
Yep. Paul Weiss, well-known American firm, right?
Yeah.
So super interesting to be in Hong Kong working for those kind of firms, I'm sure. And then an opportunity comes up in-house. Tell me how you made that connection and made that decision to leave the dashing M&A world and move into something more commercial, I guess.
Diverse.
It's a little bit more diverse.
Yeah. So I sort of left Hong Kong and came back to Australia, which is where I had my kids. I've got a son and a daughter. And I think that moment in my life was a little bit of the making of me in terms of how I approached my legal career too, because whilst I had enjoyed that M&A work, I certainly was concerned about how to juggle the demands of the nature of that work at that level and having two children who were just a year apart in age. And so I was at Ashurst back in Sydney at that time, and I dialed back my work a little bit and took some part-time work, and the firm was incredible at accommodating all of that for me.
Nice.
I wanted to continue to feel that I was growing and learning. And so whilst I was sort of spending a little bit more time at home, working more part-time for a couple of years, I actually enrolled in an executive MBA, which was
Oh,
something, and it was great. I mean, my MBA buddies became my mother's group.
and-
So it worked for me, unorthodox perhaps, but it really worked for me. And I loved my MBA. I mean, I originally started it just to sort of feel like I was, doing something meaningful and interesting. And I thought, look, if it's not, that great, I'll just do a few subjects and take a diploma or something from it. But I loved it. And I did the whole master's. And by the time I'd gotten to the end of that, I was certainly being asked by the firm to do my partnership application and to continue on that sort of journey that I was on. But I didn't have the same heart for it, I have to say. I was much more interested understanding more holistically sort of the machinations of business through that course of study to go and be a part of that in an organization. And so then I looked to something in-house, and that's how I came to start that
Wow.
journey as legal director for Colgate-Palmolive in the South Pacific.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So, I mean, I don't think I've heard that one before. I've heard
Okay.
um, a lot of journeys. I think that the thing that I find one of the most fascinating things about this new in-house legal profession, I think because there is no there's no class you take that takes you to a job, right? Like
Right.
that just doesn't exist for us. The profession is too new. Um, it's always unique, but I have to say 40 or 50 different episodes of this podcast so far, that's the first time I've heard somebody say, I was on leave, I decided to do an MBA. And that was the thing that inspired me. I mean, it totally aligns with making that move, but it's just the first time I've heard it. I think it's great. And I think it also speaks to like as you said, what a great move by Ashurst
Mm,
to give you that support, right?
yeah.
Like I've always felt
Amazing.
like those kind of leave breaks can be such an amazing, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think of like a ski jump or something, like there's this
Yeah.
whole idea. It's like,
Totally.
oh, you're slowing down and we'll have to help you come back. It's like, nah, dude, like
Yeah.
make it into a launch.
Yeah.
Because it's such a great opportunity, not just for you, but for a bunch of other people as well, right? Like if you think about
Correct. Yeah. And look, I mean, through all of it, the law has been a thread for me. Like I have a heart for the law for all sorts of reasons, but a big one for me on a personal level is that it's just really enabled me to do very fulfilling work with great people and to sort of pursue a path that has just, served me so well. And so I didn't want to leave the law, even though I'd done the MBA, but I
sure,
wanted to find a way of layering that into
absolutely.
that bigger picture. And the law
Yes.
enables that for us, I think, in our careers.
Yeah. Oh, well, totally. And when I teach this in-house legal leadership course, and in a law school, University of Florida, and one of the things I always tell the students is do the dual MBA, right?
Yeah.
Do the MBA if you want to get
Mm,
into this field, and
yeah.
you're at this early stage, first, second year of law school, like just do the MBA. Yeah, it's
Mm,
one more year, and it is invaluable.
I
Really
agree.
invaluable. And when you're older, you don't have many opportunities to be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna do an MBA now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's great that you had the opportunity to do that. I mean, obviously you leveraged a lot of things, and you seem to be a glutton for punishment in terms of qualifications. And I see that. I mean, I'm with you there. I like taking bar exams and doing degrees, but not anymore, maybe.
Yeah.
Uh, not anymore. So you're at Colgate-Palmolive. Everybody knows Colgate-Palmolive. I'm sure we all have Colgate-Palmolive products very close by. I could probably see one if I looked hard enough. And you're there for a while. So tell me about that experience. That's sort of you're cutting your teeth in house.
Yeah. No pun intended, I'm sure.
No,
Uh,
no. White, very white
yes.
teeth.
Yeah. But look, it was a great introduction to in-house life for me. In all honesty, I will say, like I thought I'd probably work there for a couple of years and then I'd sort of move on to something else. I very much went in thinking I'm going to learn a bunch. I'm excited about this, but I'm imagining it as a stepping stone to something else because it was, this was in Sydney that I took the role and but that was, a subsidiary of a multinational that was headquartered in the US.
Yep.
And to their credit, they, a couple of things. Firstly, I think they had a bit of a playbook of ensuring that they had a cohort of executives across different functions in the organization who were mobile, but also they gave them experiences to ensure that they could support the business consistently across different parts of the world. It was part of how the company ran. And the company was one of the early ones, I would say, to develop significantly offshore from its American roots and
Sure.
birthplace. So in my home country, I mean, they were here close to 100 years ago, unbelievably. Yeah. And like, that's a long way to go. To set up some, offshore business back in those days. So after a couple of years there, they asked me if I would move to Prague, of all places, and take on an EMEA general counsel role. So one of their business units, which was Hill Pet Nutrition.
Wow.
And I was quite shocked on the one hand, because I thought, well, I've got some APAC background and maybe, one day I might get asked, because it is multinational, if I would be interested in going back to Asia or somewhere in Asia or something. But I
Sure.
did not see Prague coming. I'd studied in Europe and lived in Denmark, but I'd not worked as a lawyer in Europe, although I'm UK qualified as well. And the UK was, back in those days, still part of the EU. And I certainly did not speak Czech. Had dabbled in a couple of languages, but certainly not Czech. And I sort of a bit to process. My kids were 6 and 7 at the time.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
big decision to be made around it. But again, it's probably part of this wanderlust and nomadic thread and desire to learn. I thanked them so much for asking me if I was interested in the opportunity. I said that I was, and that I'd love to do it, but sort of just juggling family and uncertainty around all of that. Could I maybe just do it for 2 years? Because I wasn't sure if I could sort of stay there long term. And I also wasn't sure about sort of moving somewhere else afterwards. And so we agreed that, and we moved to Prague. And I always sort of felt like, if it's not great, if it doesn't work out, or it doesn't work for the kids or whatever, what's the worst that can happen? You go home, and home is not a bad place to default to at the end of the day. And so I felt that there was much more to gain than lose in taking that risk and taking that opportunity. And I still have this image of, at the end of those 2 years, we actually did come back to Australia for a very short window, but at the end of those 2 years, the kids and me in the back of a car, and our driver taking us to the airport, and all of us just hugging each other and crying because we were so sad to be leaving Prague. We'd loved it so much.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where, in-house lawyers, we probably don't ever get any great sort of management level training, business training, I mean, unless you do an MBA, in the law firm world.
Yeah.
Certainly not in law school, in the law firm world.
Yeah.
The one of the great things, I mean, there's lots of not great things about big multinationals, but one of the great things about those kind of companies is the training.
Yeah.
The training and that opportunity for, so many people I know have done that sort of, okay, go. We used to do it at eBay all the time, right? And I had the great fortune to be able to, and especially in situations where somebody went on leave, to be
Yeah.
able to say, hey, would you like to go sit in the Sydney office for 6 months?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe I would.
Yes.
Maybe I'd like to go to Amsterdam for a year,
Right.
and they give you those opportunities. So it's that kind of thing where when you're balancing costs and benefits to different opportunities, you really should think like, hey, 2 years in Prague could be really great.
Yeah.
Could be really great. So that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So you came back from that one, and then PayPal, which we both know well.
Yeah. But I mean, Colgate was very generous with the moving around. So came back to Sydney just for a short window, and then we went to New York, and I took on a
wow. Okay.
specialty role there. I worked in litigation and compliance,
Great.
and really enjoyed being in sort of like the head office and understanding much more sort of how things work in a global HQ. So
Sure.
that was great. And then I headed back to Hong
Okay.
Kong So there's a bit of circularity there. I did make it back to Asia, and I was their APAC GC for a couple of years. And then
Okay.
and then you're
Wow.
right. And then I
And
and
then
then I
PayPal.
yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
Okay. So Sydney, Prague, New York, Hong Kong. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really cool collection of places to get taken to. That reminds me, I think I know you know of Bjarne Tellman, but like
Yes.
his time at Coca-Cola, that
Yeah.
reminds me of his round the world adventures. And I think that leads to a really great, international perspective and ability to work with all different cultures. And it's like a training program for, GC CEO types, right? Like
Yep.
um, fantastic. So how did you get in touch with PayPal? How did that happen?
I was contacted about the role, and it was a new role that they created. So it was Chief International Counsel, and their international headquarters is in Singapore.
Yep.
And that is all markets outside the United States for that company.
Sure.
And they had just sort of spun out of eBay, and they were sort of pretty
I
newly
remember. Don't
listed.
worry.
Yeah, yeah,
That
they
was a
were.
big day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was a really sort of dynamic, pressured but exciting time in that company in terms of standing on its own 2 feet and what were the possibilities. And they were certainly investing in their legal department, amongst other things. And they just recognized that they're at that point where they needed a bit more leadership, a bit more cohesion around the legal function in all of the different markets. And
Sure.
so it sounded like a really interesting role and something that would enable me to continue learning and growing and nurturing that curiosity that I have within myself,
Sure.
but also leveraging my skills to create value or to help create value in an organization. So I did start to interview for the role. I loved every conversation I had. I always was a bit like, would they really take somebody who doesn't have much of a financial services background? But they were
Yeah.
much more thoughtful about the attribute and that sort of ambidexterity culturally, I guess, that was important to what their vision was. And so I was offered the role and I took it and was able to sort of work in tech and financial services for the first time ever, which I truly, truly enjoyed as well. Super interesting area that just continues to, evolve in societies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I can certainly say that the eBay PayPal culture was a great one. Really, really strong, positive, people focused, which I think is what you're saying, right? Like as opposed to just you're a list of attributes and, oh, you don't have these specific, levels of experience in this area, so you're not going to tick that box. I think it's a place where they recognized
Yeah.
it's more about the person's, I don't know,
Yeah.
you might call them soft skills these days, but
Mm.
leadership skills, and they also had great leadership training.
Yeah.
Real focus on that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
you spent almost 5 years, all of that in Singapore.
Yeah, most
April?
of it. I did a little remote stint during COVID and came
Sure.
home
Yeah, yeah.
because it was such a strange time and you couldn't travel across borders. And one of my kids was in boarding school in Australia, and so
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
but,
yeah.
but
No,
otherwise Singapore.
yes, my youngest daughter says we don't talk about COVID. So
Mm.
she's only 8, but she doesn't like talking about COVID. Nobody does. So then at the end of your stint there, you most recently at Mars Wrigley, another company. I mean, like all of these companies I have used or worked at
Yeah.
to a great extent. So Mars Wrigley,
Mm.
um, tell me about that.
Yeah, so look, it was an opportunity that came my way again. And for me, it was just a very interesting way of continuing to grow. And I'll come back to that, as well as leveraging sort of the skills, the know-how, the expertise that I'd acquired to that point in my career. So consumer good, I think, can be seen as being a bit more traditional and stable, and tech is more interesting or more forward looking and so forth. Like I think there's sort of stereotypes or tropes that you hear, and I get it. But actually, I have this view that every company is a tech company or
Mm.
should consider itself to be a tech company in this day and age. And I really firmly, firmly believe that. And so I think when you look at more traditional businesses or more mature sort of industry sectors, they have quite interesting opportunities as well as challenges in digitizing, becoming more technologically oriented, etc.
Sure.
And so this was an organization that had incredible brands. I mean, there's over sort of a portfolio of 100 brands in that company. A lot of them, we know sort of top of mind, like M&M's and Snickers and Orbit and Extra, but a lot of brands, and really successful consumer goods, food organization. But it was going through like quite a transformation journey, and I recognize that I probably have a higher tolerance to sort of change and transformation and some of the ambiguity that sits around that. Like I like it. I like that sort of momentum. And so this was a role where they were looking for someone who had that ability to be a change agent. The organization had actually had, not to talk about COVID too much, but a tricky time during COVID, as you can imagine, like being in manufacturing, and then some products like chewing gum, that was not really flying off the shelves back during COVID times, etc. It's very much an impulse buy. So the business had some interesting challenges during that COVID period, and was going through like a real reinvention type phase. And then it was looking to sort of double the size of the business as well in this decade, and with an M&A background and sort of knowing different markets across the planet. There were just sort of various things I thought, they're really good challenges. I think I'll learn through that. I think I'd be able to contribute as well. And then the last piece is Mars is on the public record as saying we will be sustainable within a generation, which is a huge commitment, and I think incredibly admirable, and something that really resonated with me, that I felt very strongly about being able to get behind, and an honor to support that. And sustainability was such an emerging space from a legal and regulatory viewpoint that I was interested in learning more about that. And this was also a vehicle that enabled me to do that. So one of the things I did while I was there was sort of create a bit of a sustainability sort of center of excellence to legal, to help support that incredibly important purpose and strategic objective of the organization.
Wow. Fascinating. So, I mean, I, of course, know many of the Mars brands from the UK, US, Australia, Canada, et cetera.
Yeah.
I actually had
Do
to
you have a
negotiate
favorite?
against Mars. I think Mars bars are actually
Yeah.
probably,
I think
I really like Mars bars. They're not too complicated. I
No.
just like the
Yeah.
three, the layers, and I can still see the thing with the caramel sort of dripping down.
Thanks.
It's like perfect, right? Like the perfect
Yeah.
Mars bar. I see the wrapper. So you got me. Totally branded me. But I actually negotiated against the Mars company when I was at Amazon, and they were not pushovers, let's say. They were not
Okay.
pushovers. When Amazon was rolling out its first, I think they called it dry goods, right? Like dry goods,
Yeah. Yep.
into the warehouses and all that kind of thing, back in the day. But yeah, so coming into an organization like that, what is your sort of, I guess you're looking at modernization, transformation, acceleration.
Yeah.
Where do you think about starting? How do you go about that process?
Very much partnering sort of across the C-suite. So it wasn't just the legal function. In fact, a lot of this was going on, or plans were being laid for that to occur across the entire organization, end to end.
Wow.
And the legal function in that piece of the Mars organization, it's big for the size of the business. Like we had a legal team of about 40.
Okay.
And we were intentionally lean. I think, increasingly it's possible to stay lean and sort of leverage technology more and further. And that's what our organizations are asking of us, I think, increasingly. Sure. But I played sort of on two levels, I guess. So as a member of the C-suite, and I sort of co-sponsored a sort of a digital transformation piece across the organization, and partnered with IT colleagues and external consultants, as you can imagine, to support that. And then on the legal function side of things, I worked with my team of direct reports, and we did something called a future back exercise. And
Mm.
we didn't sort of go to external consultants or anything. We didn't spend a ton of money externally. But I had a really good sort of strategy colleague in the organization, and he was able to help us sort of think about how we go about this exercise. And so we wanted to baseline where we were at as a function in terms of how the organization was working with us, what was our brand and reputation as a function across the organization. It is a truly global organization, so understanding that across the world, what we diagnose as being the needs, but what our business partners also diagnose as being the needs and the wants of the function across the different
Yep.
pieces of the value chain of business. And then looking at the strategy of the business. So the sustainability example I gave you, like, what is the business doing? Where is it headed? And what do we as lawyers need to be upskilling in, identifying resources for, making sure that we've got processes for? And so we sort of did that work. We had workshops, we, had surveys. And it was interesting because it was around the time that ChatGPT first came out when we were doing that exercise. And so that was kind of like, in hindsight now, the dawn of tech disruption as we've
Right.
known it for the last
Yep.
couple of years. And so two things for us came out as prevailing themes. There's a lot in the work, and I'm simplifying this, but definitely really doubling down on sustainability and becoming super knowledgeable and impactful in how we could give the business acceleration in those goals whilst managing the risk, because it is quite a risky area for companies too, unfortunately, reputationally, in terms of litigation risk, regulatory and reporting sort of issues as well.
Sure.
But then the other piece for us was around tech. So, we had to become much more tech savvy as a legal function than we had ever been in the past. Firstly, because that's what was happening in the business. That was the overall imperative in the business. And we also knew that we weren't going to get extra headcount as a legal function, and we were looking to double the size of the business. So if you're going to support the demand for an organization that's double the size of what we were, and you're not going to be adding in, commensurate sort of level of resourcing, you have to get
Sure.
much more creative and think quite differently to how things have been done in the past.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I've heard that sort of narrative a couple of times now from various people about sort of this crucible, right? Where you take a more traditional approach to running a legal function,
Yeah.
and put it through the sort of like, we're not getting more headcount. How are we going to do this, right? I actually went through that at eBay as well. I had a boss who reminds me of you a bit, actually. And she said a similar thing, right? Like, they're not going to give us 15 to 40 more lawyers. So what are we not going to do? And how are we going to do more effectively what we have to do?
Yeah.
And that, of course, leads to a discussion about processes, policies, operations, and technology. And I can imagine, I mean, did Mars have legal operations when you got there?
They did, but it was very small, and rightly, I would say, like, it's centralized. So
Sure.
we were sort of reliant on that service from the center, and the Mars Inc. piece of the organization. And during our time there, and other pieces of the business were also going through similar challenges and reflections on what the opportunities were moving forward. And so that was really beefed up. We brought in a fantastic sort of head of legal operations and started to really invest in that piece of the organization to give us the tailwind that we needed to be able to support the growing business that we were a part of in Mars Wrigley.
Yeah. No, and I think that story, that evolution is becoming more and more sort of the template for,
Yeah.
and I've seen this a lot. I was just speaking about this in Amsterdam at a conference about how new CLO GC roles that I'm seeing, even in continental Europe, are looking for candidates who have the ability to build, scalable functions, and that, of course, involves operations, policies, processes, technology, et cetera. So yeah, I think we're getting to a place now where And I mean, you have a lot more experience than I do in this area, but GCs and CLOs being expected to have that skill set these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I think CEOs expect that of their CLOs or GCs today. And then I think on the operations piece, CFOs are increasingly engaged with this too. I mean, generally legal functions are a small piece of the overall overhead in a massive organization. But even so, like if you're transforming your organization and coming up with a different operating model and embedding that across the enterprise, it's kind of irrational in my mind to not be doing that in legal.
100%. Yes, of course. And as we all know, I think there's two sides to this, statement. One is like, of course, we're plugged in all over the organization, and what we do affects the company quite a lot. And that is true. But sometimes I feel like lawyers, we say that a little bit too strongly, as if no one else, as if finance doesn't also know everything that's going, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But still, if legal accelerates, you can actually accelerate the entire business. So I think CEOs, CFOs, COOs, et cetera, and the headhunters that get paid by them
Yeah.
are now looking for people who have that exact, what you're talking about, skill set. So I think I'd like to transition now to sort of, you've had this quite incredible arc, right? And we should say, Mars Wrigley, you're in Chicago at this point, right? Like you're coming to us today from Sydney, but I think you're based in Chicago now.
Yes, I was in Chicago for that role. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Chicago, and well, let's finish the story of Mars Wrigley. Like big thing happens. Tell us about the thing.
Yeah. So as I said before, like this, one of the key strategic objectives was to double the size of the organization or the business within this decade. So by the end of the decade, that was the plan. And so we've done a few acquisitions along the way. So we acquired Hotel Chocolat, which people coming to us from the UK will know. And that, of course, is now a brand that we've brought to the US. It's in Chicago, which is exciting to see. And True Fruit was another acquisition. So some of you in the US and also in Europe now might know True Fruit, which is a wonderful new brand. And so done a couple of little acquisitions, and they were, sort of aimed at strategic sort of building out product portfolio in different ways. So, experiential with respect to Hotel Chocolat and sort of expanding as sort of, choice in terms of what consumers will buy and, maybe a more permissible indulgence in terms of True Fruit. But with those types of deals don't ultimately shift the needle, certainly not in the short term, if you're looking at doing something like 2xing a large global enterprise.
Sure.
And so a few years into that, a company called Kellanova was listed, and it was another spin, talking about eBay and PayPal before.
Yep.
It was another spin. So the old WK Kellogg, they spun out Kellanova and listed that in the US. And that sort of all of the Kellogg's cereal brands around the world, except for North America. And the other brands that they have, your Pringle, Pop-Tart, things like that. So very well loved powerhouse brand that were created in the United States. And when they listed, not long after that, there was a little bit of a question mark of, I wonder if that is something that we could take a look at. Publicly traded organization, so not an easy deal to pull off, but certainly would have delivered that strategic objective of doubling the size of the business. So a very small team in the organization worked very hard on analyzing that, looking at the possibilities, could it be done in theory, and then moving on to approvals, and then could it actually be done in practice, and sort of negotiating and navigating all of that. And obviously, the deal was ultimately signed and announced last year. So an incredible achievement, really. And it's not often, I think, that companies or enterprises are able to deliver those strategic objectives in such a sort of a neat way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A really transformative
I was going to
transaction.
say, totally transformative for the
Yeah.
organization. Yeah. But
Yeah.
a lot of,
13, how many billion? Sorry.
so,
How
yeah. So the acquisition itself is a $36 billion acquisition.
36 billion. Jeez.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
the third biggest CPG deal of all time.
Wow. Yeah. So
So it is
enormous.
transformative.
I mean, most I've ever done is 9, right? So I can't even imagine how complicated, how many people were on those calls, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? Like those calls where everyone dials in and it takes 10 minutes for the dings to stop. Totally. Wow. That's a monster. So congratulations, of course, to everybody and the enormous team that was involved.
It's
I'm
a
sure you
village.
guys
Absolutely.
pop some champagne after that one.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And as you can imagine, like when you work on things like that, and then you see it be announced in the public domain and you sort of see the wonder and surprise on the faces of everyone around you. After having sort of having had it as part of my day to day for such a long time, it was wonderful to experience that moment too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so you've, as I was saying, you've seen a lot, and I'm always interested in like how the profession has developed. And I think you have a particular interest in how it's going to how it's developing now, right? Like what's happening now, as you've been in the proverbial trenches, quite significantly doing deals of that size. And so where do you think we're going? Where do you think the sort of disruption is coming from and the profession and our entire sort of industry is going?
Yeah, look, I wish I had a crystal ball because I think, one of the things we're grappling with is we actually don't really know what the future looks like in the legal industry. And it's probably going to look a little bit different in different parts of the world too. Like I do find the US fascinating because it is literally half the world's legal services industry by size, by revenue.
Right.
And so it's incredibly influential and impactful in terms of what happens outside the US because of the size of it. I think more in themes at the moment, actually. So I think this is genuine disruption that we're sort of on the precipice of. Like I wouldn't say we're in the midst of it yet, even. I think there's going to be a bit of a phenomenon of like it's something that's happening gradually. But then I think we're going to experience some things suddenly, perhaps in the future as well. It's like a little bit being a sort of a frog in a pot that's kind of like slowly getting warmer in some way. And I think that there is going to be, or there is already now, this abundance of legal knowledge and access to legal knowledge that whether we like it or not, it is going to materially change how legal work gets done in today and in the future. And there's all sorts of questions from a regulatory viewpoint around that, obviously from a quality viewpoint around that. And I would love to think that we end up with, better, faster, cheaper in, like a really serious way coming out of this. But I also love to think that there's more access to justice, that justice actually happens on a reasonable timeline and, like social goods of that nature that can come out of this. And so, and quite conceptual and philosophical here, but I also wonder, are we doing enough as a profession to ensure that education is evolving rapidly enough to support the good that can come of that? And then what are we doing about sort of skill sets and resourcing in law firms and organizations to support that? And are there enough guardrails there to ensure that we get the good and we manage for some of the risks and downsides that come with this disruption? So I see a lot of opportunity, that I sort of see a lot of, I guess, sort of friction and ambiguity as we're moving through the early stage, as I think of it, of this disruption. But I'm excited, really, really excited for the opportunity. I think if I think about the being in health, I think there's a lot of tension around, there always has been, but I think it's escalating at the moment around firms are still increasing their fees, that, sort of annual sort of returns that partners are getting in some of these, top tier mega firms is obviously raising eyebrows. Some firms are starting to charge technology fees and their hourly rates are not changing or not going down significantly. So I think there's a lot of sort of just general noise in the system around pricing.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably more grief to come. From what I see in health, I see teams doing more work internally because they can sort of get more done with what they have through using technology. So less of that commoditized bread and butter overflow work going out to firm. I'm not hearing much about that on the firm side yet, but I really do think that's happening. And maybe, there's a bit of a reckoning to happen there in certain segments of the industry in the next couple of years. But I
Yeah.
think that's the one thing I can say with sincerity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. And when I make a list of sort of characteristics for the future of our profession, to look for, to hire for, to train for, I always put change management, flexibility, that sort of stuff, embracing disruption, I guess you would call it, and here and you would call it the same, but being uh, and this is of course not what we train lawyers for, right? Like I'm sure it's the same in Australia, but certainly in the United States and the United Kingdom, we're not training young lawyers to be excited about change and flexibility. We're training them to embrace precedents and memorize things, and maybe work their way up to law professor one day, even though nearly 0% of them will be a law professor, certainly at my alma mater. So yeah, so it's exciting and a little bit terrifying, I imagine, for some people. But I think if you're leaning in to the disruption, as with all things, right? The internet, I mean, the where we are now. I mean, when I think back to early days of my career, acting as basically an air traffic controller for law firms, right? Like I didn't do my own research. I didn't have the ability to do it. We didn't have access to anything. So it was just impossible. And I had sort of 9 law firms on call. And then Amazon said, we don't use law firms. Just use Google. And I think we're now at a stage where, even the drafting of the boring memo that you don't want can be done by a machine. So it's sort of like, why would I send that externally if I can, in a few prompts, get to something good enough, and it might not be good enough for a law firm, but as we know, as everybody listening knows, we don't need that. We never have, right?
Yeah. And I think that's also quite a strong theme traditionally in the practice of law, isn't it? The striving for perfection and excellence. And like they are worthy concepts, don't get me wrong, but then there's a pragmatism in business. Otherwise,
Yep.
business doesn't get done sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
Like the good enough or the 80-20 rule. And that can be a hard one for lawyers.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that's one of those really, I don't know, it's I wouldn't say cultural, but sort of like really deeply philosophical things about the difference between in-house and private practice that is so hard to like. I see the two sort of professions separating around things like this. Around, well, it's got to be perfect. That's what we do. That's why you're hiring us, and we've been trying to tell you for so long that it doesn't need to be perfect. I mean, I spend more time telling you I don't need it to be perfect than actually using your work, right? Right. That kind of like separation is a big part, I think, of this disruption. And it's certainly going to be fascinating to see it play out over the next, decade, probably.
It's interesting to me that you think of it as a separation because I actually wonder whether or not we ultimately, or the market ultimately doesn't find a way for there to be some convergence as well. Because I think, like we do we do need, like, there is a role for external advisors, and I certainly don't see that going away. But we ultimately, to be able to coexist, we need to find more alignment, I think, between the needs of in-house departments and how they work and how they're set up, and their partnerships with external firms. Like that sense of partnership, like when we talk about partnership in the context of the legal industry, people think, oh, law firm partnership. Whereas I think the model in, the distant future, or certainly not right now, is a really healthy, well, my hope, a really healthy partnership with an interconnection between in-house and external.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think so. I think that's a very, very positive way of looking at it. I would love that. I mean, obviously, whenever I or anybody looks for great external counsel advice, they're looking for somebody that has that sort of business operational mindset, looking for efficiency, looking over the horizon, looking to accelerate my business, already knows what we do, has read the filings, understands our product, loves Mars bars, that kind of thing. And when you find those people in a law firm, you're like, oh yeah, like this is going to be great. I think unfortunately that's not the standard model. So yeah, the more we can move that profession towards, what is the optimal sort of outcome for us, that'd be fantastic for sure. Thank you for your time, Lisa. I mean, I feel like there's so much more here we could talk about. I'm really interested to hear where you go on your journey.
Look forward.
Aside from around the world to all these different places that I keep running into you. So really looking forward to seeing you again. I appreciate your time, and have a great rest of the day in Sydney.
Thank you.
And to everybody out there in podcast land, thanks for joining us. This has been the Legal Leaders Podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode.